My mom's parents are Italian Catholic, Sicilian Catholic. Uh, they were each born in Manhattan to immigrants from Italy. My dad's parents are, I don't actually know if they're exactly Anglo-Saxon. I know they are white, Irish, and Protestant, very in line with the WASPy dynamic. And in keeping with Italian Catholicism and my grandpa, especially his general worldview, they had 9 children, of whom my mom is the middle. And my mom actually, my grandpa had been wanting a boy up to and including his 9th child. And my mom, who was the 5th, was born on Christmas. And my grandpa went around telling all his friends and family, I just know the Lord's going to give me a boy for Christmas. It's going to be great. And they never bothered to do a check for any of their births before the day of. And so I imagine my grandpa felt some share of disappointment when my mom was born. And my grandpa, who himself was a civil engineer and read a lot, and in a lot of ways is a really intellectual dude, he's also a little erratic in a lot of ways, in keeping with a lot of other intellectual dudes. But his parents were first cousins, which my cousins and my sister and I have a running joke that that is the genetic tipping point that explains the absent-mindedness of all of 9 of our parents. And in some ways, I think that could totally be true. I don't really know that much about biology in any shape or form, but in other ways, I think it also has a lot to do with the fact that there were 9 of them, and that I don't picture my grandpa especially, but I don't picture my grandparents as being especially attentive, even if there were only 2. When the 6th and 7th children, who were twins, were born, 1 was male and 1 was female, and I can only imagine how little attention the female child of that set got, even the male too, but especially the female. And in keeping with the attention theory, she is famously in our family the one who's the most absent-minded. And then there were 8 and 9 after that. My dad, there were 4 of them total. He is the 3rd of the 4. And when he was 10 or so, his dad died of a heart attack. And well past that point, his understanding of the family dynamic was that his mom is the one who can't handle a lot. She's the stressful one. She's the one who's the ball buster and is always enforcing all these rules. And his dad is like the cool dude. He's like okay and doesn't impose all these harsh rules. And that was the story, the script for a long time. And when his dad died of a heart attack, he, I think, had a lot of feelings about that. And one of them was probably trying to make sense of how his dad, who didn't seem all that stressed, was the one who died of the heart attack when his mom was always the more stressed one. And that is his side. Back to my mom's side, in keeping with the absent-mindedness of all 9 of their children, of my grandparents' children. There are many examples. My mom one time accidentally reversed, or when she meant to drive forward, or drove forward when she meant to reverse, into her neighbor's empty pool. There were a number of other instances. That was a pretty big deal one. But in keeping with just the general arc of her lifetime, also my mom was in a car accident when she was younger. I think this was before she had met my dad, and it had banged up her chin pretty bad. And she goes in for reconstructive surgery, and in keeping with her luck with doctors for the rest of her life, the doctor says to her, yeah, I can fix your chin, no problem. Also, while we're in there, let's work on your nose a little bit, because really I think that's what's holding you back. And she opted for it, being in a really shitty position and vulnerable to influence, and she would regret that decision for the rest of her life. At some point, she and my dad met. They were each in the Hamptons together, doing like the college or recent college grad thing, being with a bunch of people. So they met. They were male and female and got along really well. And they were at the marrying time, and they thought, okay, like, I think this is what we're supposed to do now, right? And so they got married, and eventually had me, and then eventually had my sister, and we grew up in Jersey for a while for the better public schools and greener grass kind of thing, a place to raise a family, and eventually my mom fell in love with the next door neighbor who was also married, and he fell in love back, and that separated 2 marriages in this little conservative town. I didn't know how conservative it was while I was living there. I learned later it's a pretty conservative town. The kind of town where when my friend's dad came out as gay and divorced his wife, none of his other friends were allowed to have sleepovers at his dad's house. My dad didn't care. So that's how I learned that that was a conservative town. And also, eventually, my dad would date a few younger black women, and every time he brought any of them anywhere, they were referred to in some way as the nanny or the help or something. So conservative town. So life happens in suburbia, New Jersey. When I'm moving into high school, we all, as a family together, including now my stepfather, moved to New York. And by this point, I think my mom has had at least a couple more nose jobs in trying to reclaim her original or have a pretty one. And my sister and I keep telling her, like, Mom, we love your nose. Like, you don't have to keep changing it. You're beautiful the way you are, that kind of stuff. And for some reason, it took a really long time to communicate it in a way that we understood, which I'll get to. But if for some reason she didn't do it those times. So back up a little bit. When I was in 4th grade, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. And they had caught it early, and it was, I think it was stage 1, and they gave her chemo, and she had definitely had days of pain and would vomit, and I think lost some of her hair, but she didn't lose all of her hair, and to my recollection, it seemed to be treated relatively quickly. And I can remember asking her when I think I think we were cuddling in bed, and I can remember asking her if cancer was contagious, and I was really scared that she would say yes. And she told me, no, it's not, and we cuddled, and that was nice. And then, flash forward, we're in New York, and in New York, my mom and my stepdad, this is, at this point, all this stuff is oblivious to me, because I live in La La Land, but they're not getting along. My sister is very aware of it. She understands family dynamics. She knew all of our 8 aunts and uncles and their spouses and our 21 cousins, like, way before I ever even tried to memorize all their names, and like in order and everything. And she was aware of like the fact that our stepsisters didn't totally get along with my mom because of breaking up marriages and stuff like that, and I didn't get that. That was all over my head. So she was a little more aware of what was happening with my mom and my stepdad. But eventually, it was like a classic, like, show me you love me kind of thing. And eventually, she would divorce him, like wanting him to chase her, and he didn't. And they got divorced. And right around the same time, I was moving into college. And so that was, I might be a little off in my time. I'm thinking about this now. Okay, so I'm remembering now. So she was totally cleared of her cancer in 2000, and then, right, okay, so 2000. So then 2007, 2008, when I am going to college in my own apartment. That's what was happening. She was re-diagnosed with cancer. And for the past 2 years, she was at Memorial Sloan Kettering doing annual checkups. And for the past 2 years, she said, there's a lump in my armpit. And for the past 2 years, Memorial Sloan Kettering said, don't worry about it, it's nothing. And at 2008, after 2 years of saying, don't worry about it, it's nothing, they checked it out, and it was cancer. And it was stage 4. And understandably, she was very upset with them that they had not listened to her. So she left Memorial Sloan Kettering, even though it's supposed to be the best. And she had a long chain of different doctors. At one point, she went to a doctor who, when she had a lump in her eye, she went to him and asked, is this cancer, has it spread to my eye? And the doctor said, yeah, it could very well be. And she said, well, what's my lifespan? And he said, I'd say no more than a year, certainly. And after a few days, the lump went away, and it turned out it was a sty. So the luck with the doctors was not so great. When I was going back to college in my own place, which was, that was the spring of 2009, I was looking around for photos so I could bring as keepsakes, and I found one of my dad, my sister, and me relatively quickly, because I think I had seen that one before and knew where it was. So I wanted one of my mom and my sister and me. And my mom and I looked around for one, and we had a hard time finding one. And during that time of searching, my mom started to get really upset, because I think she had always felt guilty about separating the family, and then in seeing that there were no photos of her, my sister, and me, got really upset by that. Eventually, we did find one, and I brought those 2 photos with me. And more time and buildup of all these different forces, my mom goes out to Chicago for a trip, which my sister and I understand by now is code for she's getting another nose job. And she comes back, and she has there is certainly swollenness, which happens every time, but we can also tell that the nose is, particularly the line here, the septum, is slanted a bit. And we know that our mom's not happy with that. She has tried to sue Memorial Sloan Kettering. She looks into suing the people who did the nose job. Oh, and the first time she got breast cancer, she had a mastectomy, and I wouldn't call it awful, but it wasn't the greatest job in the world, and there was a lot of scar tissue, and she looked into suing them. And she never had any luck with getting retribution for any of this. And so my mom was always a party goer. She was always a movie goer. She was always a good food consumer. And in dealing with her cancer, she would research all the different diets and she would try them out. I never thought she'd really committed to any of them really well. When I went vegan, she tried out veganism, and every time she ever sat down to eat a meal while trying out veganism, there was something in her meal that was not vegan, and oftentimes it was like the main thing of the meal. So more time goes by, she's getting weaker, and she doesn't like going out as much, and eventually she cancels her gym membership, and it's kind of obvious to see now, but going through it, it was all very gradual. So it seems like it was never like a part of the situation. Thinking about it, all the like nice times we have, it wasn't despite cancer, it was cancer irrelevant. Like that was never even in the picture. All the fights we had, and we had plenty, they were certainly related to cancer, but it was never through the lens of cancer that I viewed these arguments or situations. It was always, for me, how are you dealing with this cancer, and how are you dealing with your pain? And that's something my mom and I always disagreed about. I would say something like how you respond to something emotionally is just as important to what happens to you. And she would very truthfully say, Pierce, you've never had cancer, you don't know what it's like. And I would say, okay, yes, I don't know what it's like to have cancer, but I still know there are people who have cancer who find ways to have outlets and that kind of thing. And we would have a lot of fights like that because, particularly when in pain, my mom's very sweet in a lot of many ways, but when in pain, she's not necessarily the nicest person in the world, and will find ways to snap and shut you down, sometimes very comedically so, and my sister and I would exchange looks, and that would still be problems. My mom, during Hurricane, I always get these two confused, during Superstorm Sandy, not Irene, or just before that, my mom had expressed, and her whole life, she had expressed concern with my clothing and my general appearance. And Pierce, you need to wear clothes that don't have holes in them. And Pierce, what are you doing with your hair? When I got dreadlocks, or tried to. And she came back from a day out one time with a whole 3 bags of clothing, and said, I happened by this like little independent market that was closing down. He needed to get rid of all his clothes, which already I didn't believe, but sure enough, when I saw a tag that said Bloomingdale's, I knew that she was lying. So I told her I didn't want any of them, and then I go to my dad's for Sunday dinner, which is tradition, and that's Superstorm Sandy passes through, and my mom calls me screaming and says, if you don't want any of the things I get you, then you can't live here anymore. And as she's talking to me, she's taking all my stuff and clothing and throwing it into the hall, and she says, well, you have to come here and pick it up by tomorrow, or I'm throwing it all away. And I say, Mom, the entire city is being quarantined right now. There is no way for me to get to you. And she says, well, you should have thought of that before you said no to the clothes I got you. And of course, this is all very funny now, and of course it wasn't very funny then. But my mom, my mom and I had the type of relationship where I could call her a cunt and she could call me an idiot, and then like a few hours later we'd be watching a movie together in bed. Grudges were very difficult to hold, even if we were convinced they were justified. So eventually, eventually being like the next day or 2 days later, when I get back, I start packing my things and putting them away, and my mom looks at me confused, like, what are you doing? Thinking that I'm supposed to be putting my clothes back into the closet, and I say, I don't want to live in a place where I have to worry about whether my clothing will be on the hall when I get back. And so we have a talk, and it was, we've had a lot of talks after fights, but that was a particularly nicer one where I think we cleared out a lot of stuff. But true to form, she would often misinterpret actions like that after a fight. I remember when I was fighting with her in the car, and we were on a way to somewhere, I don't remember where, and she kicked me out. This was back in Jersey. She kicked me out, and I got out of the car, and I decided that I want to go back home, and I want nothing to do with wherever we're going. So I'm walking the opposite direction where she goes, and 10 minutes later she drives back and tells me to get in the car, and I open the car door, and she says, you're going the wrong way, idiot, and we drive back to wherever we were going. So then my mom and I are living together in of the Upper West Side, and she and my dad would always disagree about that. My dad being the one saying, we need to, he uses this metaphor way too often, we need to push the little bird out of the nest or whatever. And my mom being the one saying, he knows exactly what he's doing, just none of it happens to be things that pay well. I have no problem supporting him while he's trying to make that work. And I always appreciated that. We were living together for a while, and we would fight often, but we were also the closest I think we had ever been. And then my mom decides to do, and at this point she's not doing the gym or going out too much, but sometimes going to see movies or to a restaurant together. I would say, like, she and her friend would go to John George together all the time and chat with the people at the bar and flirt, and sometimes I would meet them there, and so it was, we would go there a lot. I think for a while that had stopped too. And then so she decides now to do alternative treatment in Austria, and my sister, who is at this point living in California, is going to visit her there and stay with her. So she had about like 2 months there, and that was 2 months for me where I was living alone, and it was very nice. I got a lot of stuff done. I wasn't distracted, and it was much more quiet, and we wasted a lot less electricity and heat, which was in line with my environmental thing. Then on October 1st, she'd spent the previous 2 months in Austria. On October 1st, she comes back, and I think because she's concerned about flying, she had put an extra morphine patch on, and she gets off of the flight and she is zonked, like super high on painkillers, to the point where it's like weird talking to her. And we're trying to reach anyone in there, and a friend of ours who hasn't even seen her at this point, but a friend of ours who would never believe that that should stop her from making decisions, says she needs to go to the hospital. And so we take her to the hospital, and it turns out the doctor who came in to see her used a stethoscope and put it to her back, and comes up and says she's got fluid in her lungs. It's probably been developing for weeks, if not months. And I thought, how could any place in Austria have missed that if this guy just figured it out with a stethoscope? But knowing that I've had similar experiences with doctors myself, I had a benign tumor in my right ear for a long time, and many doctors never saw it, even though they had been inside. And one doctor took a little magnifier or whatever light and saw it and said he's got a tumor in his ear. So as strange as I think it is, it's something I've seen before. So she goes in for surgery, and my sister comes right back. She was going to stay in Austria for a little longer. She comes right back, and for a week or so after the surgery, my mom is still pretty high on painkillers, and also just wonderful. She's not in pain. She is not mean to anyone, and she's actually kind of cute, like the way she's just like following our leads and what we say. And then like the next day she comes out of it, or the fog, and now she's in pain and sharp as a tack with criticism, and that and presented its own sense of relief and its own sense of, oh God. So that was October or so. Eventually, on December 25th, which again is her birthday, she turned 55, and my sister and I spent the day with her. We watched a movie together, which she said, and at this point she had talked plenty about her dying. She said, see, there aren't even any good movies anymore, like what's the point of living? Something she's said plenty of times before. And she had some vanilla almond Haagen-Dazs ice cream and said, God, it's like heaven, something she had said many times before, and went to sleep. And my sister and I were on either side of her, and we had heard her snoring for almost the whole night, and all of a sudden she stopped snoring. And my sister and I didn't realize it right away, but eventually my sister Tori said she hasn't snored for a while, and that's very unusual for her. She's snored her whole life. And I said, you're right. And we turned on the light, and she was gone. And I, had been expecting it, kind of. Both my sister and I joked about everyone being so concerned about our mom when she had gone to the hospital 2 months before, when we believed she could completely outlive us all. But we also knew that she could potentially go soon. And so I'd been trying to make my peace with it the best I could. And I think I had prepared myself somewhat, but part of me is totally terrified of what that would have meant if I had experienced that without preparing for it, because it hit me really hard. And I still find her hair sometimes in places throughout the apartment. And it's made a lot of the little things, like her calling ice cream heaven, take on a new meaning, especially when every friend I've ever had who's met my mom says to me, Pierce, your mom's really cool.
And I would usually respond, yeah, I think I'll keep her. And when I remember things like that, however nice they were at the time, have a lot of pain for them now. It's gotten a lot easier not having heard her moan in pain. Still, I miss her a lot. Like the time I saw a movie that I knew she had seen, and I really wanted to talk to her about it afterward.